In this tutorial, we're going to build a shield, and we're actually going to build a high poly shield. All right, the idea being we're going to build something that isn't a game asset. This thing is going to be very high poly, and eventually we're going to use all of its surface detail to make texture maps for a simpler version. So the first thing you're going to notice here that this is not what I would call good reference. This is awful reference because it's at this very weird, awkward perspective angle, and whatever's on the right is definitely not going to match the left. That's all right though, because all I'm looking for from this is this line that runs through here over on the positive x plane, because most of what we're doing is going to be radially based, meaning it's going to be going around in a circle. And so that's why we're going to start right here with this detail over on the right side. So what I've done with the reference is I based it off of the center with that in mind. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go from create, from geometry, I'm going to go over to shapes, and let's drop a rectangle in here. And I'm going to drop in rectangles everywhere there's what looks like a little ridge on this shield. And then I'm going to draw one overall rectangle to kind of go about the entire length. And then we're just going to put a circle here in the center. And let's take that circle, and I switch to move, and now here at the bottom in my status bar I'm going to set x to 0, y to 0, and z to 0. And now let's right click on this circle and say convert to edit spline, and then over in edit spline here under modify we're going to go into geometry and we're going to use attach, and I'm going to attach these different elements together. All right, there we go. We're starting to get our shape going. Now, as we have previously with splines, we're going to come in here and under spline, we are going to select the main circle part, and then we're going to start using Boolean here under geometry. So if I click on, and so now we're combining these, we've attached these elements together, and now we are Boolean them together to make them one continuous spline. Let's go into segments, and we'll get rid of all these extra segments up on the top because we really just need what's on the bottom here. All right. And so now from here, we can start coming in and adjusting shapes. I want these guys to line up with each other. So I'm going to go to scale, and then I'm going to click and hold my pivot selection so it's selection center. And now if I hold Y and drag, that'll kind of zero those out. I can also at this point grab all these points except for the circle. I want to avoid the 3 for the little half circle. Right click, I'm going to make them all corners. Let's just get all these to be kind of consistently that same length, kind of coming out from the surface. And then all I'm doing is I'm in select, or I'm in scale, and I'm just dragging down that Y button. But you can only do that when you have selection center. If you only have it on point center, nothing's going to change. All right, let's switch. We'll go to move, we'll raise those up so that they're slightly raised above. And now, because this is going to be what we call high polygon modeling, we want it to have a lot of detail. So I'm going to actually take these points here. I'm going to use fillet and just click and drag. And I dragged them. And like this guy, there's 2 points right here. They're right on top of each other. So I'm going to set my weld really high to like 500 and hit weld, and now weld those together. And let's go around and we'll weld the points together on all of these. These are a little bit further apart. That's okay. With our weld cranked up to 500, we could weld it together. I like to set my weld to something really high because it makes it a lot easier to weld them together in case they're slightly off. Just going to grab these points and move them closer together. You'll notice the cursor likes to jump around on those things. I deleted that point. I'm going to raise this one up. Let's weld these. And just grab that handle and pull that over. There we go. Okay. Now let's make these little ridges a little bit lower. Kind of lower those down. Yeah, so they're just about on top, and now I'm just going to weld those points together as well. I probably could have done just circles now that I'm looking at it, but at least this way I'm getting practice in working and manipulating my splines. Now remember, I cranked up my weld to 500, so as I go through and I weld all these together, the weld's going really smooth, or going very easily because I did have my weld at such a high value. All right, kind of tune that a little bit. This is looking pretty good. Kind of like what I got. So let's take this and I'm going to restore my viewport. Select our spline here, and then here in the left, I'm zooming in. I'm going to right click, go to rotate, make sure my angle snap is on so it rotates at 5-degree increments. I'm just going to rotate this so that we're looking at it here in the front, like so. So let's now put a lathe on it and see how well or how bad this went. All right, so it's definitely weird looking. I guess I didn't go fully 90 degrees when I rotated it. Let's try changing the direction. Definitely not X. Y. Is it inside out? Let's do flip normals. Hey, flip the normals and that's it. That is what we're looking. We're looking to get something like that. Now, here's what we need to do. First off, I'm going to come up here to the little utilities and turn off the grid. I'm going to turn on edged faces. So when we're doing what we call a high poly model for texture generation, we don't want to see these facets, right? You see how it's the main body is very smooth, but then you get out here and you get these facets. Let's crank this up to something like 32. I'm going to do 38. There you go. This all looks smoother. I think we can go even smoother. Let's do 64. So now everything here is nice and round. I'm going to click weld core, so it welds the core of it. This is really odd though. I'm getting a lot of extra geo there in the center. Let's look at where our center point is. Oh, that's because I have the full circle. That's why. Let's go into segments and we'll delete this one because basically it was creating geo going all the way around, so we only need half of this. So if we delete that, now it's not inside out, or now it's not getting all that weird geo in the center. So we'll turn off flip normals. There we go. So let's maximize this and we can kind of take a look at it as we orbit around. I think this inner kind of bevel area is a little bit thicker than I'd like it to be. So we'll come here to vertex and turn off show on results. So we can just grab this and kind of move this in. I'll just pull that in all the way and then hit weld again. And maybe I'll take these points and I'm going to switch to scale and make sure I'm on that use selection center. I'm just going to pull these over a little bit because I don't want it to be quite as round there. There we go. I think that's looking a lot better. And when I say that, I'm looking at this raised center right here. That's what I'm kind of looking at. Now, the circle part is coming out much further than I want. We don't need it to be that long. So let's just grab that point. And again, we're in edit spline, in vertex, and we've shown results. I'm going to go to move. I'm just going to move this in. Because I don't need it to be as round coming out there. All right. So there we go. Now we got a really nice start on this model. Now there's because it is a shield, it should have a little bit of contour. We don't want it to be totally flat. So let's turn off our show on results and we can kind of get that in here. Let's give ourselves a little guide. I'm going to come in and I'm going to make a circle. And I'm going to switch to move and I'm just going to zero out its location in the world. And then let's right click and go to scale. I'm just going to scale this in to make it thinner. And then I'm going to come over here to modify, and in modify this circle, I'm going to crank up its interpolation to 12. And then I'm going to select my shield that I made. Oops. Let's maximize this, make this full screen. Maybe make this guy a little bit bigger. All right. Now I can come in here. If I go down to the vertex, what I'm going to do is just switch to move and move these points out so that they're kind of sitting out here on that kind of curved surface. And that's going to help us get kind of a general guide. All I'm using that circle that I put in here, that I scaled, all I'm using that for is just kind of a general guide to give me sort of that angle that I want for the general curve of the circle. I'm going to make sure this points at 0. Pull this out a little bit. Pull him over some. Oh, check it out. I can move it independent. It's because I want these to be Bezier. So let's click on that. There we go. Now we can adjust this a little bit more. I'm going to right click, say Bezier corner again, so I can move that handle closer to the other one to make it a little bit more uniform. Just set it to Bezier. All right. That'll work. So maybe we'll just tune these a little bit so they're, oh, looks like they're all Bezier corners, which generally is not a problem. I can move this. If I want to adjust this, I certainly could adjust the handles here so that they kind of line up a little bit. And that'll help me get that. It's weird that it's snapping. I don't know why it's snapping like that. Maybe instead of doing that, what I'm going to do is just go into Refine and click and add a point there. And then I can just move that point to where I want it. And just make sure it's a Bezier point. So I can adjust it, adjust this angle, take this one. I guess it's snapping them to make them a straight line is what it's doing. The rest of them seem to be pretty good. That one was probably the biggest span out there. So, all right, let's take a look at how that overall shape ended up. All right, if we look at it, you can see it's curved ever so slightly. It's not a lot. It's really just a very subtle curve, so it's really not that bad. Okay, let's work on getting a lot more of that other detail in there. So I'm going to right-click and say Object Properties. And I'm going to change my visibility to 0.1 and then hit OK. So now my shield's see-through. Let's make sure we have edged faces turned on. And I'm going to right-click and say Freeze Selection. There we go. So now I can see the geo, but I won't accidentally click on it. What I want to do at this point is I'm going to go back to geometry and just make a sphere. Make it about the size of the spheres that are behind it. And then I'm going to just sort of drag him out so he's kind of protruding from the surface. Where is that? I guess I froze him too soon, so we'll unfreeze it. Right-click, Object Properties, and adjust the visibility back to 1. There we go. And so now we can kind of orbit around him. If you use orbit in the bottom right-hand corner, it'll orbit around your selection. That works better. So we can kind of adjust this guy. Maybe rotate him just a tiny bit. I turned off my angle snap. There we go. All right. There we go. He's looking pretty good. Next, what we're going to do is let's hide that selection. I'm going to right-click on this guy and say Clone as a copy. And we're just going to move him over because we're going to want another one out here. And now let's unhide all, zoom in, and we're just going to move him so that he is about halfway through. We'll kind of rotate him to match sort of that surface. There we go. Okay. So if we hide our shield, there we go. So we're going to focus in on these little circles first. So let's unhide all. What I'm going to do, I'm going to select one of these circles, and over here in Hierarchy, I'm going to say Effect Pivot Only. I'm going to switch to Move, and I want to change his position for X, Y, and Z so he is zeroed out in the world. And then while I'm at it, I'm going to go to Rotation And I'm going to leave the X value at 90, but I'm going to change the Z value to 0. And then let's grab the other sphere and we'll do the same thing. We'll leave his X value of rotation at 90, change his Z to 0, and then in move, we'll make sure that all of his values are at 0 in the world. All right, so now we have our little spheres and we're going to use a tool. So I'm in the front view now. All right, I have the front view active, and this is important for how this works. Tools, Array, and I'm going to click Preview here. And we have all these different increments, and basically it's going to make multiple copies of our object. So I'm going to click Instance, and here under Rotate Z, because Z is going back from us, I'm going to enter some values and see how now it's making multiple copies. And so I'm just going to click on this little spinner here for the count, and I'm just going to drag that up because we want to, until we start getting close, then we'll be a little bit more careful. All right, so we want to make sure we have just enough to go all the way around. And I'm going to click OK, because now we've made all this extra geo out there for those spheres on the other side. So now we'll click the one here in the center. I'll say Tools, Array. And if we turn on Preview, see it has the previous settings, but those are way close together. So I'm just going to reset all my parameters. And now I can start to increase my Z value. And then I'll just adjust the count for how many I need. I may need to zoom out and pan over. It is possible you may accidentally, if you click in another window, you may have to turn your preview back on. You just want to get, you don't want to overlap your guys. Make sure that you just get just enough. And if the angle, right, if the angle is like 60 degrees isn't right, maybe it needs to be something else, you can always just tune it. I'll click OK. So now you can see I have this, if I maximize my perspective view, you can see, if I hit F4, you can see this high poly shield we're starting to get. It's looking pretty cool, right? It's going to be pretty neat. So the kind of the last thing that we're missing are sort of these little disk elements that are out there. So let's go ahead and make those. I'm going to select my shield, right click, and say Hide Selection. So I kind of want to get this sort of disk look and shape that exists here. So let's come in, let's think about how best to do it. Maybe we'll do a cylinder. Just click and drag, and then I'm going to draw it, push it, drag up, and then I'm going to go to Modify, and I'm going to increase the height segments, or the cap segments to like 6. I'm going to reduce the height segments to 1, but increase the number of sides to like 48. And then I'm just going to right click on this model and say Convert to Edit Poly. And I'm just going to delete kind of that back the polygon that's on the back side. I don't need him. Let's turn on edge faces so we can see what we're doing. You know what? If I just come in here at the top and region select and then hold Alt and deselect everything in the front, now I have what I need to delete. All right. Now I can grab kind of that back side and kind of push it up here. Let's unhide all. Right click, unhide all. We'll just adjust this so that it's kind of coming through here. We could even select our shield and turn off the little eyeball and lathe so you can see what you're doing. And then you could select your cylinder again. And if the spheres are all in the way, you could select the little outline for the shield and right click and say hide unselected. So I had the cylinder and the shield outline selected. So let's grab our cylinder, go into border, and I'm just going to adjust this. What happens, why don't I just click at the top, so I'm at the top, and put an FFD 2 by 2 by 2. So I can just grab the control points and just kind of drag that down. There we go. I'm going to drag these guys back. And then let's turn our shield, we'll turn that eyeball back on. So it looks like this guy needs to come down a little bit further to kind of be centered. And that should be good. Let's just grab those control points and just move them back just a hair. All right, right click, rotate poly. And now I'm going to come in here, and what I want to do is I'm actually going to turn on border, and I'm going to select the polygon or the edges that are on the back side of this. Let's right click, see hide and select it. All right, I'm going to grab I deleted that polygon on the back, so I'm going to select this, and I'm going to hit cap, go into polygon, click on this, and now I'm going to use outline, but I'm going to do an outline of like 0.25. It's too much. I'm going to do 0.125 because I want to have a little bit of an angle. I don't want it to be completely straight coming out from the surface. And I'm going to go into edge, and I'm going to double click on that outer edge of this thing, and I'm going to turn on my chamfer, and I want to set it to like, what if we put it at, okay, 1 is way too much, 0.25, but then we'll crank up the number of edge connects to like 3, and hit OK. We grab the whole thing, orbit around the back, select that one polygon on the back, we don't need that. Your element, and hit auto smooth. Perfect. All right, this guy's looking pretty good. Let's unhide all. And now, here in the front, let's do the same thing. We're going to go to hierarchy, effect pivot only. We're in move, and we're going to make sure we're at 0 and 0. And then under rotation, the rotation values are fine. Rotation of 90 degrees is fine. All right, so let's select our shield, right click, and hide it again. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Unhide all. Or actually, we can hide the shield. And I'm going to go with front active tools, array. Oops, we're going to actually have something selected when we activate array. Tools, array. Turn on preview, but then we got to reset our parameters. I'm going to decrease the number to 7. And I'm just going to crank up that rotation value. And really, let's set it to 8. And then I want to rotate it enough so that the one on the end is rotating and landing on top of the other guy. You see it just keeps jumping over him. So let's do 51.5, and that does it. And so now I can just reduce my number to 7. I like to put 1 extra, excuse me, so then I can make sure that they're going all the way around. All right, unhide all. And there we go. Now we have what we call a high polygon shield. All right, we can select that little random reference cylinder that or shape that we had. We can just hide him. Right. And we can select our, let's go ahead and we'll just save this. And last thing we're going to do is select our reference and hide that. We're going to grab all of this model here, and we're going to, under this area, it says Create Selection SE. If you click in there, you can actually create selection sets. I'm going to type in high space poly and hit enter. So now, anytime I want to get what we consider our high poly model, we can just click on it and select it. All right, and so that's how you go through and you build yourself a high poly mesh for creating textures. So there you go.